for such a wonderful welcome, and thank you for that. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about Wendy. Now, Wendy owned an organization called the Beijing Language Academy, and predominantly, she focused on teaching Mandarin. Now, what she found was that she was charging $50 to $80 an hour, but so many people from other states were moving in to start their own business, or other people from China were moving in to start their own businesses. And like most people starting their own business, they were willing to cut their prices to the absolute bone just to acquire their first clients. She was struggling to get $50 to $80 an hour because other people were willing to offer $30 to $50 an hour just to get their first clients. So she came to me with a question, and her question was, how do I compete in such a highly saturated market with such high levels of competition that are willing to charge less than me? My answer was simply that I would love to help you avoid the battle altogether. So many times our markets are completely saturated, and we focus on price, we focus on how do we get better at selling, and we forget that there are open markets that we could potentially tap into where there is virtually no competition. So with Wendy, when I did the analysis, what I realized first was there were a couple of things she was doing for just 2 clients. The first thing she helped them do was understand the difference between doing business in China and doing business in the Western world. And one of those elements was she helped them understand Galaxy. Now, Galaxy, for people from Australia or people from a lot of the Western countries, means outer space. But for people in China, it's a definition of how they view rapport. Now, I'm sure there's people in this room that understand that there's a large difference between how rapport is generated in China versus how rapport is generated in the Western world. For instance, we like to have a meeting with a client and try and sign a deal there on the day. Maybe if the client's really dragging their feet, we'll wait a week or maybe a month. While in China, they want to have dinner 5 or 6 times, find out all about your family, perhaps see you drunk over karaoke once or twice, just to see the kind of person that you are. All before they want to speak business. Because in the Western world, we're talking 12 and 24-month contracts, while a lot of times in China, they're talking 50 and 100-year deals. This is longer than a lot of people's lifetimes. She also helped them understand the difference between e-commerce in China versus e-commerce in the Western world. And thirdly, she helped them understand the difference with respect and why accent reduction was vital. Not that you sound exactly the same, but that you appreciate their culture enough to try and assimilate by understanding and reducing your accent. Very similarly to how when you receive a business card in China, when you receive a business card in the Western world, we continue talking. We put it in our pocket and we just continue the conversation. While in the East, and I had this happen to me, I was talking to a person on the plane that worked for Nike, and he held the card the entire time during the conversation. He held it with 2 hands, he appreciated it, and eventually he then put it away into his pocket. Helping these 2 people understand the differences between doing business in China to doing business in the Western world was such a vitally important thing. And I asked Wendy, what was it exactly that she was doing for these clients? And she said, well, I'm teaching them Mandarin, but I'm just helping them with a couple of additional things as well. I said, Wendy, is it fair to assume that you are helping these 2 people become successful in China? And she said, well, yeah, I guess that's exactly what I was doing. She was so focused on the functional perspectives, the features of what she did, she didn't think for what the high-level benefit of what she was providing. Now, these were 2 clients. However, they were 2 very specific and completely profilable clients. So what we did is we created the China Success Coach. She owned the company China Success Institute. It was a complete rebranding. And all of a sudden, instead of struggling to charge $50 to $80 an hour, she had a 5-week program where she worked with the executive, the spouse, and any children involved to help them be ready to be relocated over to China. Now, why the executive and the spouse? Well, firstly, being able to sell to 3 or 4 or 5 people means you can charge a lot more. But secondly, if the executive is being relocated to China, anybody that has ever been relocated knows that if your spouse and your children aren't surviving in that new culture, then your success rate in that country is going to be a lot harder because you're going to be constantly called home. So for Wendy, She was helping these people become successful when they were being relocated, and we worked out the most ideal place to find customers. She would find immigration agents. Now, for anyone that doesn't know what an immigration agent does, these are the people that you go to get a visa to work in a location for an extended period of time. These immigration agents would charge a few $1,000s to organise a visa. There'd be a lot of work involved, and they'd help to get that specific person a visa to go and work. However, what Wendy did is she then offered a $3,000 commission check to anybody that would help her convert a sale into a prospective client into a new client. So she was passing on $3,000 for just doing this simple thing. They would organise the visa and say, now, I just want to double check you've done all of your research about how to be as successful as you possibly can in China. And most people would say, yeah, I've started to learn Mandarin and I'm starting to get the hang of it. And they would respond, I think you need to speak to the China Success Coach. There's a lot more involved than that. She went from charging $50 to $80 an hour and struggling to get clients, selling as hard as she could, thinking that what she needed to do was learn to be a better salesperson, to all of a sudden charging $30,000 and making $27,000 with no sales whatsoever, just by understanding the higher level benefit of what she did and joint venturing with a few niche clients that allowed her to generate traffic into her business. This is the power of differentiation and message unification. If Wendy had have started with sales, she would have already lost. Now, I know a lot of times we focus on improving the people in the retail stores or improving our telemarketing teams or our direct sales teams. However, that works to a point. But if you don't work on your differentiation and your message unification, you're making your life much harder than it needs to be. You've already lost. It's time to think differently. Customers have more options these days. They can do their own research. They go out looking at reviews. They look for messages that they identify with. And if you don't learn to think smarter and adapt, you're going to get lost in the noise. Now, I'd like to use the TiVo example for this. Now, does anyone in the room, has anyone seen TiVo or know the branding of TiVo? Yeah? Okay, great. So TiVo is the market of digital receivers. And analysts predicted that they would have 760,000 subscriptions within 12 months of launch. They had the highest quality product. They were heavily backed by venture capital funding. And their marketing department was so strong that TiVo became a verb. People would be at the bar talking about the football games and say, I'll just TiVo it. I'll TiVo Oprah. It became a word that in America, in Australia for a long time, it became the actual saying for when people would say, you know, I'll just press record on my television. However, most people didn't actually own TiVo devices when they did it. In 2002, in the Advertising Age magazine, it was quoted to say that there were more outhouses than TiVo devices in American homes. Now, for people that don't know what an outhouse is, this is an old, obsolete toilet that sits in the back of a house that looks something like this. There were 671,000 of these old, falling apart outhouses in the back of American homes. However, there were 514,000 TiVo devices 3 years after the launch, when they were predicted to have sold 760,000 units. There was only 514,000. Nobody understood the technology. What went wrong? They tried to sell based on the features of their product. It was an amazing technology. They could record live TV. You could fast forward, you could rewind. It would even analyze the viewing habits of the person and decide what shows you would probably like to watch. I owned a TiVo, and I can tell you anyone that did would be an absolute advocate of the brand. And that's what Rebecca Barr, the spokesperson for TiVo, was quoted to say to the New York Times. Until people get their hands on it, they don't understand why they want it. But how could they? They didn't have a unified message. They didn't explain why people would want the product. All they did was talk about features, tech jargon. What if they had have said, TV on your terms. As a person, we like to control our lives. Why wouldn't we want to control our TV? People would have got that message. Now, I know a lot of people in technology. I mean, service is easy. You can talk about the unified message of a service. You can talk about the specific benefits people can get. However, when you're talking about a product, a lot of people, especially people that are high R&D focused, they want to talk about the features, and why wouldn't you? You spend a long time working on them and making them possible. The problem is, the customers don't understand. Think for a second to the MP3 market. Did anyone own an MP3 player? Yeah, okay. That market was incredibly fierce. There were so many organizations out there. We have the 1 gig MP3 player, the 3 gig MP3 player. People spent fortunes on R&D to launch the 5 gig MP3 player. We have the ability to fast forward better. We have shockproofing. There are so many different little features that people had. The market was crazy competitive. People were spending fortunes on separating them and their brand. And then Apple launched with 1,000 songs in your pocket, and the market exploded. Simply, people could understand that. How many songs do I get for a gig? What is a gig? I mean, this was back in 1998, where people were still trying to get the hang of technology. But they did understand everybody had those big walls of CDs. And they knew they didn't have 1,000 songs in that wall of CDs. They just knew it took up the entire wall. And now I can have it in my pocket. People just all of a sudden got it. And that's why there were lines out the doors of every Apple shop. Stop selling on features, price, and discounts. People want a message that they can identify with, and for that, they will pay a premium. So think, what is your message? Everybody here, I've heard some wonderful speeches about the different product lines. But what's the unified message that's going to get those customers to buy? What you need to be looking at is what speaks to a customer. From a lot of these presentations, I saw wonderful inward-out marketing. You've got to think differently. You've got to look at what the customer will identify with. What are they looking for? Now, TiVo has gone through a rebrand. However, the market is now full of competitors like Netflix, like Apple TV. Now their technology isn't so cool. Perhaps if they had a launch with this at the start, commercials on your terms. If they had have launched with that at the start, perhaps they would have had the success that they were predicted to have. Now, we're only talking about one of their features and the higher level benefit of that. They could have come up with something like I was suggesting about wanting to control your own TV viewership. What can we learn from this? Think to yourself, what is the unique benefits that my product provides? Now, this is derived from the from the specs, from the patented technology, from all of the features that your product has. However, the higher level benefit of those is what your customers are interested in. If your technology has several features, think at them all in a holistic approach and ask yourself, what is the higher level benefit of that? So let's talk about niche marketing. Now, when I talk about niche marketing, I hear a lot of people say to me, yeah, but I'm missing out. Through some conversations that I've had since I got here, Electrolux has got a lot of focus on having high levels of KPIs and wanting to sell as much product as possible, like all corporates do, like any business does. So selling to a small niche market excludes you from a lot of others. However, if you focus on specific niches, that's where you get your growth. Speaking to everybody is truly speaking to nobody. Plus, it's ridiculously expensive. A few years back, I wanted to open up a business school. The problem was, nobody trusts a new school. And what I found was I was faced with two really horrible options. I could have gone after and targeted people that were looking for further education in business. But then I would have been competing against MBA students, people that wanted to study at high-level institutions so they could come to places like Electrolux and say, I have an MBA, and get a higher-level job. it would have taken me years to penetrate that market. And I may have been not successful. My second option was to target the market of high school students, people that were graduating high school and needed further education. But think about it. These people need a degree where they can leverage that for the rest of their lives. They want something that has been around for years that they can brag about and talk about the fact that they loved it. They also love to have a good time. And my institution was relatively new. There were less parties, there were less sporting teams, there were less social activities. We were purely about education. We then discovered a market of tradespeople. Now, what our focus was people that were on building sites. These people, tradespeople, generally school had let them down. They hated school. They left school in year 10, at the age of 16, because it didn't work for them and they went out and did a trade qualification. School had let them down, so they had a view of school, and I'm sure everybody in the room has heard it, that if you can't do, you teach. It's what they told themselves to feel better about the fact that school had let them down. Now, these people were struggling in business because they didn't know how to run one. Generally, they started by doing an apprenticeship. They then learned from a boss that probably taught them through aggression, sarcasm, and anger. So eventually, though, they figured it out and they became better than most people. Then they wanted to go out in business for themselves because they were getting paid the same as what everyone else was, and they decided that they could do better on their own. So they opened up a business. Next thing they knew, they hired staff. And those staff were probably earning more money than they were. Why? Because they had no idea how to market. They had no idea how to run their books and accounting. They had no idea how to run any of their systems, and for that, they were losing money hand over fist. Their staff members would ask them questions, and of course, they answered them with aggression, sarcasm, and anger. Why? Because these people were getting paid more than they were. So therefore, they were upset to answer the questions that these people had. They know they needed business coaching. Problem is, with the success of their business, they couldn't afford business coaching. But they hated school. So we launched with business coaching at a price you can afford. It didn't matter. It didn't matter to these people at all what kind of what kind of classroom format that we had. They wouldn't have studied with us. What they cared about was that they got access to business coaches. Every one of our educators was a business coach actively coaching out in the market. Every one of the classes was run like a mastermind group. 20 people in a room, only people from the trade demographic. All helping each other like a mastermind would to help their businesses be as successful as possible, run by a coach to talk about how they would implement educational strategy into their business. We grew to 3,500 students within 3 years. Most schools grow by 100, 200 students every year because they're new. It takes a long time to develop that relationship. That is rapid growth. Now, sure, we started with the trade demographic. We started with people that were on a building site, plumbers, electricians, tilers, anyone that worked on that trade site. Why? Because I understood my customer better than they understood themselves. My salespeople would go out and speak to 20 plumbers every single week, 20 electricians every single week. These customers would say, I don't have any problems. We knew that they did. We would simply say something like, sure, no, I completely understand. However, most people within your business experience this, this, and this. Is that something that you're experiencing? And the response we would get back is, oh God, yes. Yes, I've got that problem, I've got that problem. Now I feel comfortable sharing it with you because you clearly understand me. We knew our customer because we only sold to one specific niche. Now, once we capitalized that niche, we then could grow. I then decided that florists and hairdressers, these were tradespeople too. They'd left school at the age of 16 and they'd started to do a hairdressing apprenticeship or a florist apprenticeship. And so we took on so many of these and we became the market leader for education within the hairdressing industry within a space of about 7 months. Then we said, well, hang on a second, what about lawyers and doctors? These people have studied for several years. However, they never learned how to run their business. So really, doctors and lawyers are tradespeople too. So we started to sell to them. We picked up the Law Institute of Victoria, some of the largest medical associations, major radiation departments. We even picked up the Australian football team's top 3 premiership teams. Why? Because these people retired at the age of 35. They were great at their functional skill of football, but now a lot of brands wanted to attach them to their brand to sell franchises, and they had no idea how to evaluate them. So they studied with us. 3,500 students within 3 years, not from not selling to the masses, but from starting with one niche and then continually expanding the boundaries within our functional skill, which was providing business coaching in an educational format. So let's look at how it can apply to other styles of businesses. And we'll do that by talking about accounting software. I can't imagine, when I talk about accounting software, obviously it's not the most exciting topic in the world, but it is a hugely competitive market. In Australia, MYOB is one of the strongest presences for accounting software. In America, QuickBooks. Now, these two companies fight every one of those other companies by focusing their energies in R&D to have the best product available. Xero launched into the market with cloud-based technology, a completely new market, and they blew it apart. QuickBooks and MYOB are losing market share like crazy to Xero. Why? Because of the technology that they developed. So now QuickBooks and MYOB are starting to build their cloud-based software. It is absolute warfare in the accounting software industry. Meet Blackbaud. Blackbaud's message is your passion, our purpose. They have no competition in the non-for-profit industry. Anybody in non-for-profit knows that they are the absolute gold standard. They own the industry. They have no competition. They spend less time on R&D because they wait and see what happens out in the market. Whatever works, they will then instill into their technology. They own the non-for-profit industry. They've experienced 15% growth on average year on year for the last 10 years. They spend less statistically on marketing than any other accounting-based software. Why? Because they focused on a niche and they own it. Now, what can we learn from this? Everybody is not your customer. If you think everybody is your customer, you're going to find business much harder than it needs to be. What you need to do is you need to be looking for unmet needs within your market, and you need to become a niche champion. Organizations that run the test of time, of course, they have good products. Now, when I was originally speaking about coming to this event, one of the major reasons I decided that I was going to fly all the way from America to Australia, because I've got events right before and right after. But I wanted to do it and I would have dropped anything to do it because my grandfather used to sell Electrolux vacuum cleaners door to door. I know the product works. I know that the Electrolux product is by far the gold standard in a lot of the things, in a lot of the industries that you're in. I also know that you spend a huge amount on R&D. However, if you don't focus on the unmet needs that you're delivering, if you don't understand the avatar of that person. Now, we were talking earlier about the fact that you invite people in and you interview them, but you don't understand them completely by doing that. You need to understand them in their habitat. For me, when I write blog posts, I write to a specific person, one person in my life that I met that I know loves my content. And every time, I know exactly who I'm writing for. And that's why I've won so many awards since I launched my website only last year. It's because I write to the customer that I know better than they know themselves. As a corporation, you need niche champions. You need to have somebody that for every single product line you have, looks for the unmet need in those market segments and starts to work out how those products fit. You need to understand what messages they need to hear, not the features, not the model numbers. I mean, they shouldn't even be on your website. Customers don't care about a model number. They care about the unmet need that you fill. And a niche champion's job is to take risk. A niche champion's job is to identify what market spaces are open to be absolutely penetrated. Now, when you talk about niche marketing, we're talking about small little market segments. Now, with the targets that you have, you've got to sell to more than one niche. But you can target those niches in a much more sophisticated way based on where they hang out, what they do, as opposed to putting up a billboard or a TV advertisement that speaks to everybody. The niche champion's job is to work out what the unmet need is and make sure the message gets delivered to those people in the way that they need to help, they need to receive it. And for that, the consumer will pay a premium. But let's be realistic. Everybody here doesn't want to lose their job by making a massive mistake. Everybody here is terrified of taking risk. So let's talk about an analysis of 108 companies that took risk some of the time. Out of 86% of launches, they offered minor improvements, just minor improvements on pre-existing product lines to pre-existing markets. And look at the results, 62% of revenues and only 39% of profits. 14%, only 14% of launches were made to new markets, but yet it resulted in 38% of revenue and a whopping 61% of profit. Now, generally when I say this, the first thing that people think is, yeah, but there were a lot of losses made as well, because anytime you launch a new product to a new market or an existing product to a new market by filling a new unmet need, by educating them on that, there's always risk. This 61% includes all of the costs associated with the failures as well. As an organization, you need to be looking past the safe bet. If you focus your attention on keeping a broad message and playing safe, then nobody will rally to your cause. Why is it that all these small brands are starting to get huge acquisition? You offer a product line that fits absolutely everybody. You're speaking to everybody, but you're speaking to nobody. All these other product lines, all these other competitors, they have one or two products. They're not as good a quality as you, but they know who their customer is. And they're focusing their energy on marketing to those people. New markets equals big dollars. And as an organization, you have to understand what unmet needs you're filling for which products and starting to message to those clients that you can fill that need. So let's talk about sales systemization. And a lot of times I find that when people talk about sales systemization the way I'm going to talk to you about it, generally the person that gets up and talks about it doesn't have a sales background. And I shouldn't have had a sales background. In fact, when I first started in sales, I had a reading speed, in high school, I had a reading speed of a 6th grader. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I was horribly introverted because of the reading speed issues and a few other things. But I spoke to my father before I decided to go to university. I got into the course that I decided to do, and like most Australians, we pick any course that sounds cool. However, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my father could see in me that how hard I worked to get through high school. And if I had gone to university at that point, I probably wouldn't have made it. So I took a job in a real estate agency. And the only reason for doing that was it was a safe job. I could hide away in the back office and not get noticed while I worked out what I wanted to do. I promised my father that I'd support myself. So therefore, the real estate agency worked perfectly for me. Until just before Christmas, where the organisation went bankrupt. Now, in Australia, and I'm sure a lot of people here have travelled to Australia, and the Australians will definitely understand this, getting a job just before Christmas is virtually impossible. Why? We take off between the 20th of December to the 15th of January. All the decision makers, they're just not there. So I couldn't get a job. I was trying, I couldn't find one. The only jobs I could find were commission-only door-to-door sales. I was horribly introverted. I had no idea what I was doing. But I had no option. I promised my family I'd support myself, so that's what I went to do. After 5 days product training, I got sent out to go and sell. Now, a lot of people, when I tell people my story of sales, they say, well, yeah, you're up here, you're speaking to a lot of people. You're clearly charismatic, you're comfortable in yourself, you know what you're doing. Back then, and I always have to point out, this was my sister's wedding. A couple of times I've not mentioned that, and people have come up afterwards and they say, oh, I didn't know you were married. I'm not, it's my sister's wedding. So I suffered from really bad acne. So I was also really uncomfortable about that. I was walking into people's shops and trying to sell, uncomfortable, introverted about everything that I was doing. It was 93 doors before I made my first sale. That's 93 doors. This is the exact road that I walked down. There are 2,000 stores down that road, and I just started at one side, no idea what I was doing, and just started walking. It was 93 doors of rejection, 93 doors of getting told to go and get a real job, 93 doors of feeling absolutely horrible. And then finally I made a sale, my very first, and I sold them everything. And I'd made $70. I remember walking out, I was ecstatic. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, I've got to do this again tomorrow and for the rest of the year. That was not okay. So I went to YouTube. Now, for me, I would have loved to read something like Brian Tracy's Psychology of Selling and thank Christ that things like Audible now exist. So I consume about 3 books a week, and I do it all on Audible. If you have a disability or something that holds you back, find a way to get around it. And for me, Audible and LizGo for reading blog posts absolutely did that for me. But YouTube back then was fantastic. Surprise to most people, there's more there than just cat videos. So I learned, and I typed in the steps of a sale, and I learned those steps. Then what I did is I started with rapport. Most people, they want to learn everything straight away. We're always in a hurry, right? I learned rapport, and I made a sale the next day much sooner. But I also wasted a lot of time. I spent a lot of time talking to people, and then when I would ask about their telecommunications, they would then say to me, oh, the decision maker's not here. So what I then learned was qualification. Then I learned asking questions, telling stories, and this is one thing when you're talking about niche marketing that's vitally important. If you talk about your features, people can decide logically whether or not they're interested in it. But when you tell a story, no one can disagree with a story. Everybody loves stories. It taps straight into our emotional side. And we work out whether we identify with that story. So I learned how to tell stories, and my sales went through the roof. I learned how to do a trial close. I learned how to do a hard close. What I learned was the fact that sales is a learnable skill and not something you have to have the gift of the gab or an innate ability that nobody can master. Within 6 weeks, I went from having no idea how to sell to the best salesperson in the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. It took me 6 weeks. I won every award that the company had. I got promoted 7 times in 12 months. About 12 months into my career, I decided that I was going to open up a phone shop. I decided to do a business of my own. And the problem that I had is the market was hugely saturated and hugely competitive. Now, for those in Australia will know that when Optus came into the market, Telstra didn't know what hit them. All of a sudden, price became a factor. Telstra had no problem selling at whatever price they wanted. Then opened up Vodafone and all the other competitors, and everybody started to compete on price. Business customers, though, savings were important. But if the phone went down, service was everything. And most people had sent their service offshore, or you had to wait on hold for extended periods of time because it was about cutting costs. Businesses, they wanted service they could count on. So we launched our brand around service you can count on. And we captured the B2B market. Within 3 years, we became the largest business-to-business brokership for cell phones or mobile phones in the country. By year 3, we turned over $4.2 million. That's rapid growth. The focus was not about having a new product or a different product. It was just delivering to an unmet need, a market of customers that were out there and wanting to buy something that they couldn't get from anywhere else, something they used to get quite successfully with the major carrier. Sales is not the answer sometimes. The message, the niche, makes sales incredibly easy. I used to go around and I got invited to speak at Colliers International recently. And Colliers International said, we want you to teach our guys how to sell better. And for 10 years, I spent my entire life teaching people how to sell better. But with most organizations, if you get the unified message right, the niching right, then sales is simple. No more do you need to worry about the hard close. No more do you need to look for the I can sell ice to Eskimos salespeople. Because if you've got a message that customers already identify with and you speak to them directly, they've already made their purchasing decisions. In 2007, I won the Young Achiever Award. But more importantly, I went from terrified to sell to teaching hundreds. And now I teach thousands. Now, I know a lot of people, when I tell this story, they say to me, look, Matt, okay, I get it. Everything can be learned. There's not one skill out there that you have to have a natural ability for. But come on, you learn to sell off YouTube. So I like to talk about Nate Boyer. Nate Boyer was a former Green Beret. Now that's high-level military in the US. And he decided he wanted to go back to school, and he wanted to try something he'd never done before. He decided he wanted to play football. He did what's called walking on to the football field. This is American football, gridiron. It is almost impossible to walk on and get selected for the team. Nate Boyer did. He played for the University of Texas Longhorns for several years. Then he was signed for the Seattle Seahawks. At 34, he was 8 years older than any player, the average player on any of the NFL football teams, making him the oldest draft pick in history. And when he was asked how he learned to snap the football, which was his natural skill, and everybody would assume it was a natural skill, this is what he replied. He taught himself by Googling and watching YouTube videos. They were his game tapes. He watched them. He just went out in the backyard at 34 and tried it out. Every skill can be learned. So if you're thinking niche marketing is too hard or scary, or message unification and differentiation is one of those things you don't know, there are resources everywhere. Free resources, paid resources, whichever is your preference. Every skill can be learned. If Nate Boyer can learn to snap a football, and for an introverted kid, if I can learn to go out and sell, every one of these skills is 100% masterable. But I'm not here to teach you sales. I'm here to tell you sales has changed. In all of my businesses, they look predominantly like this. Huge direct marketing presence, door-to-door sales, direct salespeople, telemarketers, and a lot of advertising to bring people into our retail spaces. But these days, times have changed. Using technology, strategy, and psychology, you can get your customers to chase you. For 10 years, I spent time getting my message out to the world by hammering the message on them by telemarketing, by paying hugely expensive salespeople, and by doing broad-based marketing to just get people interested to come into my store. And then I realized using technology, I could get them to chase me. 70% of shoppers no longer make their decisions based on retailers' advice. 70%. Or because they saw a brand advertisement. So our focus should always be, how do we increase the effectiveness of the sales in the retail store? How do we get these people working in these shops to talk about our products and services and be absolute, champions of our brand? But 70% have already made their decision before they go. 67% of people, this to me, I found ridiculous when I found this statistic. 67% of people trust online reviews as much as word-of-mouth recommendations. 67%, they find a review online and they trust it as much as talking to their best friend about a product or service. The market is changing. 76% of customers interact with brands long before they walk into a bricks and mortar store. 76%. They already have preconceived ideas. When you go into a retail store and they've got a vast number of products and you have a person standing there who has to know all of these, it's overwhelming for that person. He can be your champion, but he can't know as much as the person that just spent the weekend reading about this one product. 64% of every dollar spent in a retail store is influenced by digital interactions. That's $0.2 trillion worth of annual sales are influenced by digital interactions. With the right message and the right strategy, customers now come to you. People are actively looking for the right message, a message that speaks to them. Our job, or the trick if you like, is to use technology to create and point a megaphone in the exact right direction. In the past, the requirement of a marketing team was to put up billboards, put up TV ads, to get customers to go into a retail store. We had to focus on a broad-based marketing because if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to make the sales that we need to make as an organization. Today, that's changed. Through social medias, we can now profile our customers specifically and deliver the message that they identify with, specifically to them. We can communicate our unified message to our ideal customer through social medias, through podcasts, through email campaigns, through our own website, directing people to the pages that they will identify with. All of this is a holistic approach to targeting specific niches for specific products and specific product lines, as opposed to talking about us as an organization who is the master of cooking. I can speak directly to those people that need dishwashers. For the people that do have dishwashers already, I can speak directly to the power of why Electrolux is the dishwasher for them based on what their unique needs are, based on their age group. We were talking last night with the Australians that went upstairs. We talked about the fact that single guys in Australia, there's a large number of us. Not enough to be your entire marketing, but there is a large number of us. And for those that don't know, that haven't been single in a while, Australian males, we don't generally wash down dishes very often. So we'll grab our food and we'll put it in the dishwasher. And it will sit there, because we're only eating for ourselves, and a lot of times we eat takeout food, sometimes a week, sometimes 2 weeks before we'll turn the dishwasher on. That food's baking on there for all that time. If somebody said to me, hey, we got a dishwasher that it doesn't matter how baked on you put your food, we'll clean it up. That's the dishwasher I'd buy. If you tell me about features, about swirl cycles and all these, I have no idea what you're talking about, and I lost interest. Speaking to them through the forums that you know by profiling exactly who they are and by knowing your customer, you can now target niche markets as opposed to broad markets and speak directly to them with a message that they identify with. Brands now have the ability to build relationships directly with their ideal prospects, taking the customer experience and relationship to the next level. For me, rapid growth is 3 steps: differentiation, message unification, niche marketing, and sales systemization. As I said, for the Electrolux brand, my grandfather sold it. I know you have a strong product. Hearing some of the product deliveries and some of the things that you've worked on, unbelievable technology. But unless you focus on all these 3, your message will get forgotten. Abraham Lincoln once said, if I was given 6 hours to cut down a tree, I would spend the first 4 sharpening the saw. It's time to sharpen the saw. Thank you.